Okay, the hour of 7 o'clock having arrived, I call the Bridgewater Rainham School Committee meeting to order. I'd just like to remind everyone we are live on via our Facebook channel. It's being taped for later broadcast whenever you'd like to see it. And we are going to go right into the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you could remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance to remember those we've lost. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so let's introduce folks here. On my left is Mr. Damarino, Mrs. Martelli, Ms. Conrad Laborento. On my right, Ms. Shavs, Ms. King, Mr. Loesch, Ms. Mainville, Ms. Davenport, the superintendent and various administrators in the audience, and myself, Tim Fitzgibbons. So, welcome all. Per school committee policy, we will open up the floor for 12 minutes for public comment. If you go beyond 3 minutes, we're going to ask you to step back and submit any other comments to Ms. McDougall. Is there anyone here for public comment? Going once, going twice, no one here for public comment. All right, before we move into correspondence and recognition, I would take a motion to take item 7C out of order, which is the VR Regional School District audit presentation. Our auditor, Ms. Renee Davis, is here from Markham LLP, and we just want to make sure she gets in and out as needed. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Made by Mrs. King, second by Mr. Damarino. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Ms. Markham, welcome up. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Davis, you come from Markham.
I would correct you. Renee Davis with Markham. I'm the audit partner on the engagement, and a little bit to open up about that is when we did the engagement, most of our audit work was done under Powers and Sullivan. So previously, Powers and Sullivan, we actually merged.
No relation to the superintendent.
Yeah, there's a lot of Powers
So
and Sullivans around. We merged with Markham on February 1st. So your audit reports, if you look at them, are under Powers and Sullivan. I'm introducing myself under Markham. Next year will be under Markham. So same firm, doing the same thing. 100% of our firm just merged into a larger firm, not unusual in the environment that they're in. And what I'd like to do tonight is to talk a little bit about the results of the audit, explain a little bit about what an audit is and isn't. And I got a couple of questions ahead of time, so I want to make sure we have time to address those questions. So the audit, your independent audit of your financial statements, every year we have to come in and we sort of start in, I'm going to say the spring, or before you even end the fiscal year, doing a risk assessment. We talk to your staff and look at your controls, your internal controls, and the way you process things, the way you come up with your budget, balance your budget, collect receipts, make sure they get deposited correctly, and manage your spending to make sure things are being approved properly and things are being charged to the correct accounts, and that you have control to reconcile the cash that's in the banks, any receivables, making sure money's coming in, and making sure you're not overspending or managing the budget in accordance with those. So we do an assessment in the springtime. We do some tests of those internal controls. So after we do our risk assessment, we test the internal controls. A big focus of the audit is also your federal spending, right, your federal expenditures. And we have to do a program assessment on your federal expenditures and do some federal compliance testing on what we deem to be the most significant or major programs. So all of that happens while you're still working during the fiscal year. We then sort of go away for a couple of months and come back after the end of the fiscal year to test the final financial statements. Now, part of that process is we come in and we get your records, right? You send us your trial balances, you send us your cash accounts and your bank reconciliations. We assist the district with putting together the financial statements. Just to clarify, they're not our financial statements, they're yours. Management then gets a draft, so we get all the information from send you a draft of your reports, and management is responsible for reviewing those draft reports and coming back with changes or things that they don't agree with or don't understand. And really a big focus of the audit is making sure that management does understand the information that's in those financial statements. And we get a representation letter back saying, yes, we agree. And once we're done with all of our audit work and we have enough audit evidence that we're comfortable with the numbers and you've signed a representation letter, the report gets finalized. So we were finalized, I think, February this year with the year. So it almost becomes a year-round process. We also help with the E&D calculation. You'll notice your audit does not include, it's not an audit of E&D. E&D is something that goes through the state, that is your available fund balance that's calculated every year, but we do help with that process. So we're doing some non-audit services, but just to recognize that the goal of the audit is to make sure your financial statements are properly stated. So part of that and part of a risk assessment is looking at things, of course, that are the big numbers, right? We're not here looking at every transaction. We're not looking at maybe little transactions. We're looking at your processes and your controls. And you'll notice if you look at your financial statements, some of the big things in those are the net pension liability, the OPEB liability, which is your health insurance liability that you're going to pay to retirees. So those are one-time things. They're not, you have to pay your pension assessment every year, and you have to pay for health insurance for retirees. But as far as booking that big liability, it's not something that you do every day. Capital assets, same thing. It's something that management puts together at the end of the year just for the audit, but it's not something that you're doing as part of your day-to-day operations. So there's a big focus on how those numbers go into your financial statements. To be able to do that, we work with your actuaries, with your retirement system, with your actuaries to make sure we understand the information that they're getting from you and what they're using for those liabilities, and that those liabilities and the disclosures in your financial statements are accurate. A big part of your report, big part of the footnotes, a big liability, and a big part of the supplemental schedules all relates to those pension and OPEB liabilities. They sort of walk and talk similarly. You have, with your pension system, you have an obligation to be pre-funding that for a period of time. With OPEB, there's not a similar legal obligation. You have opted to start funding it. You've been putting in so far $10,000 a year. It's not a lot of money compared to the big liability, but you do have a trust fund set up. You have started to fund that. Another part of it that we focus on, of course, your controls, your budget, so your general fund budget, right? You approve a budget every year, you get budgetary reports to see how that budget is working, and of course, the results of that budget, what you collect in revenue that's unbudgeted or what you turn back in expenditures, all lead down to your E&D, or your available fund balance that you can then use in the future for spending. So that's the money that you have in your savings account, if you will. So there's a focus to make sure that you have controls to report things accurately and timely, and that things are being approved in a regular course of business. One of the things that we had noted in the audit, and I think this was one of the questions that was brought up, is there were a few minor things that were overexpended. It's a big budget. 99.9% of it was dead on, and there were a few lines that were overexpended. They've already put controls in place to ensure that doesn't happen again in the future. Some of the questions that sort of came up about this related to, what can you tell us about how are we doing, and are there risk areas? What is there a guarantee of how we're going to do in the future? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't guarantee future success. What I will say is that you do have controls in place. So when we come in, management is cooperative with us. When we ask for information, it's provided to us. We have we receive things timely during the audit on schedule, and I even think that we had some turnover a couple of years ago. I think the new staff has really stepped up and said, what do you need? Let's get on a good schedule to get this done as timely as we can. So I think there's definitely been improvements there. And whenever we bring things up, things come up day to day during the audit, minor issues, and management really takes those to heart and corrects them as we're bringing them up. So of course, it's after the fact. An audit is, right now, we're talking about the audit for the year ended June 30th, 23. So we're into June of 24 now. Before you know it, we're going to be auditing your 24 books. So an audit is always looking at what happened in the past to tell you, you know, it's not a prediction of the future. It's telling you that your financial statements as presented are accurate based on the results of the test that we did. How you're going to do in the future really depends on you, but you do have controls in place, and the things you want to look at going forward, you know, how much of your OPEB liability are you funding or do you want to fund, right? That's a real liability that you are going to be obligated to pay in the future. Do you have conservative budgeting, right? So if you start going too tight with your revenue budget, if you're really budgeting because you need to have your expenditures in place, you get too strict with your revenue budget, you may find yourself in a situation where E&D isn't what you thought it was before. Right now, it's been fine. You actually had really good turnbacks last year in your revenue. You collected more than you budgeted. A lot of that was because you had a lot of cash on hand. You had some school building going on, so maybe an unusual amount of cash on hand, and interest rates were really high. So that really bled into your E&D last year. Your expenditures are pretty on, like you do turn back money, it's not excessive, so it looks like you have a good process for your expenditure budget. Debt service, of course, with the new school coming online, your debt service goes up a little bit more. It is not out of line with normal. So looking at your fixed costs in the future, you know, health insurance is sort of unpredictable a little bit, but anything related to debt service, you don't want that to be too much of your budget because that could constrain you in what you can do with other areas of operation. But overall,
Can I stop you for 1 second? If the debt service has a Prop 2.5 debt exclusion, does it matter that much at that point?
no, because you're right. So you're assessing the communities, and if you can still increase their regular assessments because that's out of the window for that, then you're fine.
Thank you.
Agreed. And the other big part of it I mentioned was was the single, I'm going to call it the single audit, your testing of federal grants. We had no findings related to that. So special education was tested along with one of the COVID programs, just COVID specific. We do specific compliance testing, making sure that you're not only charging things correctly, but you procured them correctly, that you are reporting to the federal government correctly and timely. So all of that compliance testing that's required by the federal government went through without any findings. Anything in particular you want me to go through on the financial statements?
So did you address all the questions you asked?
Let me make sure that I did. No, I think
Beforehand.
there's one other one. So I'll give you the questions. Were there any areas that worked really well or things that could be improved? I talked about that. The audit goes very, very smoothly. We get full cooperation. I couldn't ask for more as far as that goes. Whenever something, and there has been nothing of significance that's come up, but whenever something that is not significant comes up and we discuss it, they act on that. One of the comments that did come up during the audit, and it's in the disclosures and the footnotes, was uninsured bank accounts. Right? That's been something that has come to highlight over the past couple of years because we had a couple of bank failures. I feel like we had this known in for a long time and nobody really paid much attention, but now people do. What happens with that, you have a lot of cash on hand at any given time. And the treasurer puts that in various different bank accounts, right? So it goes to different bank accounts. And you have an investment policy that's going to limit your risk. So it will limit how much money has to be covered by insurance and how much money is just in the bank that may not be insured. Part of what you want to assess with that is what banks you have money in. So at the end of the year, about 50% of the deposits that you had were uninsured, which is outside of your range of what you consider in your investment policy. It's not really outside what I see in other places, but it's outside of your policy, so it's disclosed in your notes. We brought it up during the audit, and management has already taken action to make sure that you are now in a sweep situation. So when you have money in any one bank, anything over $250,000 is not covered by FDIC or the federal government. Some banks you can get collateralization agreements. Some have Massachusetts state DIF insurance that covers above that. And you had two banks in particular that did not have either of those, so they're listed as uninsured, uncollateralized. And what they've done subsequent to year end, when we brought it up during the audit, was now that money is in sweep accounts, so it actually gets swept out overnight into accounts that can be fully insured. So we don't see that as a problem going forward. It was brought up during the audit and it was disclosed to the financial statement. So that was another question that came in. Talking about internal controls, again, we had no issue with the testing of internal controls. You have a good warrant process, things are being approved, things are charged correctly. We do make a number of I'm going to call audit adjustments. Your books and records are kept on the state system, so they're kept on a budgetary basis of accounting. Year-end adjustments are required to bring you up to GAAP, what we call GAAP accounting or full accrual accounting. So we bring on your OPEB, your pension, your fixed assets, your debt, all of that through entries, through journal entries, but all of the information comes right from Tola's office, right from your finance office. So we're not making corrections as we go through, we're helping to predict your financial statements.
Thank you. And that was the end of the pre-submitted questions?
Yeah, I think I pretty much covered all of them. Any problems or things that could make it hard for us in the future, I mentioned that, right? You want to make sure that you have a good use of E&D, right? You want to make sure that you have adequate reserves. You certainly do right now. Conservative budgeting, making sure that your fixed costs are, I'm going to say not out of control, but that you have them, if fixed costs are going to be debt, that they're debt excluded, so they're not impacting your ability to hire teachers and things like that. You want to be able to continue operating and having a good capital plan in place. Again, going through the big school construction project, we saw no issues with the project or the way that was handled. So I think that covers them all.
Thank you. Are you open to have a couple questions
sure.
from the committee on this side? Anyone?
I just wanted to confirm that in addition to that audit report, that there was an internal controls report that was provided to the district?
There was. It's a report on federal award programs. That's the single, what we call the single audit report. So there were two reports issued. One was the basic financial statements. The other was the report on federal awards. And the first opinion in that is the report on internal controls over financial reporting.
Anything else, Ms. Mango? Okay. On this side, anything from anyone? Okay, well, Ms. Davis, thank you so much for the report. And it's nice to hear that we're doing things mostly the right way. Auditors always have to find something, so, we wouldn't pay you otherwise. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right, moving back to the agenda, correspondence and recognition. Student Advisory Council, Ms. King.
So this is, as we know in the past, will be the Student Advisory Council for this year, their last report out at the school year. We do have 2 seniors graduating, and then they will pick back up with 2 new members plus the 3 current members in the fall. So this will be their last. We're going to have Ms. Shaw and Ms. Barber go last, and then I will have some final words as well. So if you want to take that to the podium. Oh, actually, so Mr. Daly, do you want to come up first? Do you have it?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. This was originally written for the May meeting, so this is a little bit wrong. But last month, meaning April, on the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th, the Rainwater Players put on their original musical, See the Light, written by VR alum Mike Balderini, and it was a fun experience for the cast and really moved the audience. Moving on from Rainwater, the VR Junior Prom recently took place on Friday, May 10th. The venue was located in Westport, at White's of Westport, and the students enjoyed it very much. The theme was Starry Night, with blue, silver, and white being used as colors for the photo booth and centerpieces on the tables. All different colors and kinds of dresses and suits were worn, making it a very fashionable night. Teachers and staff in attendance also made the prom very fun and made for a positive experience. The prom court consisted of 6 juniors: Corey Cahill, Evan Bray, Fabio Gershony, Caleb Tripp, Drew Bolin, and Student Committee Advisory Board's very own Rachel Corey. Lastly, I would like to thank our two seniors, Nolan Barbour and Danny Schaus, for a wonderful year on the advisory board. And I wish both of them the best of luck on their future endeavors. And we will miss you so much. I would now like to welcome Rachel Corey to the stage.
Good evening, school committee. As you probably heard recently, I went to the International DECA competition in Anaheim, California. This was an amazing trip where I met DECA members from across the world. I also heard the story of keynote speaker Kido Okili, and a former DECA member from Toronto who is now a global product line manager in special projects for the Jordan brand at Nike World Headquarters in Oregon. After his speech, I also saw a DECA ICDC performance by the Jabberwockies, which was just incredible. Also, as I returned at the start of May, there has been action by one of BR's adjustment counselors to promote the significance of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Mr. Suarez organized 3 presentations, including guest speakers, that all students were allowed to attend. These presentations, along with similar school-wide announcements, promoted the ideas of meditation, healthy relationships, coping strategies, and how to handle stress and anxiety. Also, students from Ms. Palmerelli's journalism class worked with the student school adjustment counselors to create posters, flyers, and visuals to promote mental health-related themes and resources that were posted around the school. The adjustment counselors and Ms. Palmerini's class hope to continue with these events throughout the rest of the month, which was May. Thank you for a great year on the school committee, and I wish Nolan and Danny a great summer and transition into college. I now welcome Sophia.
Good evening, school committee and Superintendent Powers. On Tuesday, May 21st, BR held an academic and athletic awards night. Teachers and coaches had the opportunity to nominate students who stood out in different ways to receive a variety of awards. On top of those awards, they also recognized students in the Principals Club, a club of sorts for the top students in each grade. And then on May 3rd, Bucks Buddies also held a musical bingo night. Students, teachers, families, and friends were all invited to play bingo and even earned some candy prizes. Pizza was donated by a few different places that night. And I wish to congratulate Danny and Nolan and hope that they have a good transition into college. And then I welcome Nolan Barbour to this panel.
Good evening, everyone. Before I talk about my little blurb, I just kind of like to thank the school committee and Mrs. Curley for giving me this opportunity to not only present things that are kind of going on in our school, but kind of also just work on my own public speaking skills, because it's high school, it's kind of nervous getting up and talking to people. So yeah.
As an adult, it's hard to.
So I'm just very thankful for this opportunity and couldn't be more grateful. On Wednesday, May 15th, the National Honor Society hosted a field day, including the class of 2024, 2025, and both the Bridgewater and Rainham Middle School National Honor Societies. This was the first ever collaboration between the high school and middle school chapters. We hosted a number of fun games that tested both our mental and physical abilities in both a competitive and fun way to celebrate all the hard work that we've done over the school year. The event was a huge success, and I hope we become an annual tradition where all groups can collaborate together. I'd now like to welcome Danny Schaus to the stage.
Good evening. On May 6th, the Student Committee Advisory Board had the wonderful opportunity to attend the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Day on the Hill. After arriving in Boston, we had the opportunity to hear from speakers from our very own Massachusetts House of Representatives, the director of DESE, as well as the vice and president of the Association of School Committees. After hearing their inspirational speeches about their visions for education and how we can help them achieve their goal, we took a few steps over to the Capitol building. There, we met with Senator William Timothy, who not only assured us that education was on the top of his list, but also gave a private tour of the Senate where we even got to sit in their seats. This is not only a fun trip, but also gave us an interesting perspective on what's going on with the people upstairs and showed us how we can help today and in the future. I also have something written down. Give me 1 second. For the past 3 years, I've had the privilege and pleasure of speaking in front of you each month. I'm sorry. Not only has this experience given me stronger public speaking skills,
but a connection to the community that only a few get the opportunity to have. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's been an emotional week. I know.
Good job.
Although it seems like yesterday, I was here as a sophomore, promising to use this opportunity as a stepping stone for my future. This has become a foundation, not just a stone. I would like to thank Ms. Curley and Ms. King for not only integrating us into this committee, but taking a valid interest into our personal and academic lives. I cannot thank you enough for these past 3 years. And although this will be my last time speaking as a student chair, I hope to be back. I will be back. Thank you.
Mrs. King has a presentation.
I'll call you. Now I'm gonna start crying. Good evening, everyone. As this is our Student Advisory Council's last meeting of the school year, I would like to also acknowledge their advisor, Mrs. Kathleen Curley. I have worked with Ms. Curley these past 2 years, and she really just goes above and beyond with morning meetings, attending school committee meetings with them, communicating with the students and myself, thinking of ways for them to do outreach in the community and their school community to better benefit their mission, and going on field trips. I appreciate everything she does, and I know they do as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge our student advisory members, Quinn Daly, Rachel Corey, and Sophia King, for your monthly reports at school committee meetings. And I also want to thank you for your commitment to the Student Advisory Council and attending these morning meetings and school committee meetings. I'm in awe every month when you confidently give your report. Public speaking is something that many of us still work on and struggle with, but it's so important in many aspects of your lives. So thank you for being here and your commitment to the Student Advisory Council and your school as a whole. I look forward to working with you again in the next school year. Can I have Quinn come up? Can I have Rachel come up? Have Sophia King come up? Who's that? I would also like to say a few words to celebrate our 2 seniors on the Student Advisory Council, as this is their last meeting after graduation. It wasn't before, but they're here after graduation. Nolan Barbour has been on the Student Advisory Council for 2 years and has served as co-chair this year with Ms. Jobs. This year he was president of the National Honor Society, captain of the lacrosse team, and played varsity golf. In addition to graduating in the top of his class, he also takes part in student leadership program at VR. Mr. Barbour will be heading to Boston College to study biochemistry in the fall. Danny Shops has been on the Student Advisory Council for 3 years and has served as co-chair this year with Mr. Barbour. She was co-captain of the debate team, a member of the drama club, on TJ Robotics team, National Honor Society, and Yearbook Club. Ms. Shops will be heading to Bryant University to study business management. And Dan the Hill, she did say she will be there someday, and I totally agree. I'm in awe of your confidence and poise at this young age, so I know you're going to do amazing. Come on. I just want to congratulate them as they head off and graduate and go to college in the fall. I've worked with them for the past 2 years, and again, public speaking and getting involved in your community is something we really want to foster in young people, because if you're starting at such a young age now, then it will only
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job. Great job. See you. Thank you. So we may be having a meeting in July, and you're welcome to come back if you'd like. I think the superintendent would like to say a few words.
I just wanted to say thank you. I know many of you shared tonight your reasons for maybe getting involved in this, but what you may not realize is the leadership qualities and characteristics that you displayed by getting up here each and every month. It's not easy, as you know, and as Mrs. King has shared, but the fact that you commit to it, you've committed to, some of you, multiple years doing this, really just, it speaks a lot about you and the potential that you all have. I think the other thing that I just want to say thank you, you come up here each month, and I have the privilege of being in your school every day and in all of our schools, but you come up here each month and share some of the kind of behind the scenes awesome things that happen in our schools. And many of our committee members attend all the events that you speak about, but there's many members of the public that can't get in there all the time, and so you provide that opportunity for the public to really hear about all the amazing things that you do as kids, that our staff does as teachers, and so I just want to say thank you. And obviously, Nolan and Danny, this is not the last time we'll see you, but certainly you're always part of Red Nation. We hope to see you soon, and don't be strangers. And Ms. Curley and the rest of the team, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you all very much. I think I speak for the school committee on saying congratulations, great job. We look forward to the returning members coming back next fall. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Teacher Appreciation Week, Nurses Week, Mr. Powers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to provide a quick acknowledgement and update on some of the happenings. It's hard to believe our last meeting was actually back in April, so a lot has happened in our district. One of those two major milestones being that of National Teacher Appreciation Week and National School Nurses Week and Day as well, that first week in May. So we haven't had a chance since then to acknowledge them at the school committee meeting. I know Ms. Grennan, our nurse leader, is here, and Ms. Mallett from our, Ms. Slater from our...
No, I'm Malin.
No, Mallett, I had it right. From our faculty is here as well. So it's we appreciate everything our staff does on a daily basis, but it's nice that they actually set aside a month and designated day for them throughout the school year. It's certainly not enough, but it's at least something to acknowledge that. So that's how we started the month off. Certainly you've heard a lot about the month of May and all the different activities that have gone on for our students, not just our high school students, but across the district, a lot of end of the year activities. But most importantly, obviously, we've held 3 recent graduations. I know some of you were able to attend those, so thank you. The first was our Excel evening program, where we had 5 students graduate. If you've had the opportunity to attend those, you really know what a special event that is. That's an opportunity for our students who may not have taken the traditional path to graduation, have had to face some life challenges and obstacles, and so they really show their true grit, determination, and perseverance, and we're so proud of them. Following that was the Therapeutic Day program, or our Therapeutic Day school graduation. Again, similar type of paths that some of our students have to take. So we graduated 3 students in that program. We're so proud of them. They have life plans, which is great. One is heading over to Bridgewater State. Another is going to trade school, and one is hoping to get into cosmetology school. So we're very, very proud of those students. And then certainly this past Friday night, we graduated nearly 300 students from high school. It was a perfect evening. We had great weather. The event went so smooth. Ms. Watson and her team do an amazing job organizing that. If you were there, you can certainly attest to that, how great the evening was. And so I just want to congratulate all of our students that graduated. But leading up to graduation, you heard our students talk about, we had the National Honor Society induction. We held our multilingual awards night for our students that are English language learners and their families. We also had the Academic and Sports Award night that I know one of our students talked about. So again, it really just, it just highlights some of the awesome things that happen around our district. I also want to acknowledge, and maybe Nolan didn't want to share this, you noticed Nolan's hair was slightly different color this evening. The boys lacrosse team has actually made the state playoffs, and so they actually won, most of the team dyed their hair some shade of yellow. But they actually won their first round game on Sunday, so they'll advance. The girls lacrosse team won their first game on Saturday, the first round of the playoffs. They're actually playing this evening, so hopefully we'll get some updates. And also the softball team won this weekend as well, so they're advancing. So I just wanted to congratulate those student athletes, and we actually had many of our students, I think we had 3 or 4 students today speak at the Bridgewater Town Pride flag raising ceremony on the Common. So again, we're always so proud of our students when we get up and speak in public and represent the school. And I did want to just take, because it has been such a significant amount of time, just to, I know Mr. Fitzgibbon started our meeting with a moment of silence, but I did want to just acknowledge the passing of Mr. Jack Powers. He was a high school faculty member. I know you're aware of this, but again, we haven't necessarily been able to publicly acknowledge in this forum. Mr. Powers was a member of the faculty in the social studies department. I think what really spoke to me about Mr. Powers and the impact he had was the outpouring that we saw from students, from parents, from his fellow colleagues on memory boards that were posted online, and just the number of faculty members and students that showed up to his services as well. I think it speaks to the type of person he was and the impact he had. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge his passing as well, and certainly he has left a void on the high school and the district. That concludes my report.
Much beyond appreciation. Yes, thank you. School committee correspondence. The school committee should have received an email from Mrs. McDougall earlier today with a suggestion on how I'd like to approach reporting out on issues, kudos, etc., received by any of the members of the school committee. Hopefully we can make that work. We're going to punt the committee correspondence till next week when we have our regular scheduled meeting to see if we can make that work. And there was nothing so urgent it had to be brought up tonight. All right, moving on to secretary clerk resignation. During our reorganization, we elected Ms. Mainville to be the secretary clerk of the committee. That's what happens when you don't show up to meetings, Ms. Mainville. I'm just kidding. But she has decided that she'd like to step down from that role, which is certainly her prerogative, and we thank her for her brief but important service on the committee. And therefore, we're going to roll right into letter E, nomination and vote to fill secretary clerk position. So I'll open the floor for nominations, and I'll make a nomination of Mr. Damarino for secretary clerk. Is there a second for that? Second by Ms. Davenport. Is there another nomination to be made? Seeing none, all those in favor of Mr. Damarino taking over secretary clerk duties, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Damarino, for being voluntold by your committee. All right, we're moving on to consent agenda, which is approval of minutes from past meetings, approval of general ledger warrants, school committee meeting schedule, FY25 payroll and warrant schedule, and acceptance of gifts. And we do want to acknowledge these. I think Town of Bridgewater grant to the Rainwater Players in the sum of $2,000. A French horn donated to the VRRHS Music Department by A.K. Musaramarch, which is awesome. $804.80 parent donation to the class of 2026. Another $455 parent donation to the class of 2026, and another $500 donation to the class of 2026. So the class of 26, congratulations, you're making out tonight. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you. Mrs. King, did we cover Student Advisory Council already? Okay. Moving on, we are coming up to the report of the superintendent, Mr. Powers,
Chairman,
and he's
I-
going to give us his self-evaluation and any other things that are on his mind that he didn't tell us under the last few minutes.
Would you like me to turn this a little bit just so you can see better? Yeah,
That would be great.
Is
Thank
that,
you.
hopefully I can turn it some more if need be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the school committee. I do have several items under the superintendent's report. The first being an easy one. EF Tours is a international or national, an international tour company that organizes school trips. Again, they could travel across our great country, or they could certainly go overseas to a foreign country. EF Tours has in the past organized trips within the district. These are not school-sponsored events, so it's not involving anything that has to do with our policies, procedures. This is simply an outside organization wanting to offer a tour. So they have reached out to the high school about potentially scheduling a tour for future years. Obviously, there's a lot of behind the scenes that has to go into that. There's informational nights that have to happen. There's obviously have to do some interest gathering to see if there's a commitment. If you remember, I believe, well, I know it was before COVID, EF Tours ran a tour here at middle school. I think they went to Italy, Judy, I think that's where it was. And again, not school sponsored. Obviously, we have some policies on overnight travel that are school sanctioned, but these are outside of that. And so they do afford an opportunity for our students to attend. And sometimes they do ask some of our faculty and staff to chaperone those trips as well as parents, just because of the familiarity. So I just wanted to, one, provide you that information. No action is needed on that, but just in case you see, some information being disseminated out to the community. Again, those are not school-sponsored events. Those are through the EF Tour. I did want to give you an update on the FY25 budget, as well as go over my evidence for the superintendent's evaluation. I know many of you have seen some of this information, especially if you've been to Budget Sub. Of course, now I'm at a little disadvantage to know what slides up, but I will I'll follow along with my notes here. Okay. So again, this is information that has all been shared with you and with the public over the last almost 6 months, going back to our January preliminary budget presentation. Some of this information has just simply been updated. So for example, at that time, we didn't necessarily know our 24-25 numbers. I actually believe that day of the preliminary presentation, we had received our preliminary Chapter 70. So this has just been updated with what we received for our state funding. So again, you can see there, and obviously at that time, we didn't necessarily know what the Bridgewater Marine contribution would be, but now we do. So that this has been updated. You can see our budget history there. Again, these numbers are all numbers that should be familiar to you. Again, the only initial update there is the FY25 approved column. I did include what we had initially requested back in January, compared to what was actually approved based on state funding and the funding from both communities. And you can see that I also did include a difference from FY24 to FY25. And again, in many categories, we actually saw a reduction. And certainly in the categories where we saw an increase or significant increases, we have talked about what some of those cost drivers are, but I will also review that this evening for you. So you can see here, obviously, when we kind of compare our increase to state funding, increase to local from local contributions from the towns, versus what our cost drivers are. We've talked about that. Obviously, we had some contractual obligations that we had to fulfill. We entered into negotiations with 3 of our unions this year, and so fulfilling those obligations that we agreed upon, and we actually have 1 union that we're still negotiating with. So these numbers will change slightly, which I'll share at the end. Transportation increase, health insurance increase, special ed tuition cost increase, and obviously increase in utilities, as Ms. Babalola has shared with you. Obviously, our contracts with some of our utility vendors have expired, and so you've been voted to new contracts, but obviously those prices have increased, so we're anticipating that. So as you know, we were faced with roughly a $3.5 million shortfall based on what we're going to get from funding versus what our cost drivers were going to be. And as I shared, again, I've shared this with you in the past, we worked internally to decrease that amount to make up that difference. We obviously cut supplies and materials. We increased our local contributions, so as we've already shared, we took additional money out of E&D. We did use funds from school choice. We did use funds from our tuition-in program, so if a student is attending outside of Bridgewater Rainham and they may actually attend one of our in-district special education programs, we're able to charge them tuition to do that. And so that money, that revolving account had grown up in numbers, and so we were able to take some funding from there. Obviously, when we had some retirements and we were able to fill those, we have anticipated what we refer to as refer to as breakage. So the savings, if someone retires at 100,000, we hire somebody at 75. Obviously, the savings there are 25. So looking at potential retirements, and then obviously any type of staffing reduction, resignation, retirements, leaves, we're able to bring that number up to about 1.6, and then obviously increase our circuit breaker. So when we went through that exercise, we were pretty close. We knew we were about $800 away from actually making that number up. And then from there, we had some additional drivers that came to light, ones that we knew were potentially going to, we were going to be faced with, but were not originally included in the budget because the budget was being, projected to be so tight that we weren't able to account for all these initially. So that being the case, we had to make up for these additional cost drivers, again, working with a number that was approved by both towns and obviously the school. So as you know, those are additional cost drivers, as I just mentioned. We just settled with our BREA, Bridgewater Rainham Education Association, Unit A, which encompasses our certified staff, and Unit B, which is our ESPs, or education support professionals. As I mentioned, we're currently negotiating with one of our ASME unions, the secretaries. We're looking at potential costs of about $1 million. Now, I say potential because obviously with any type of contractual obligations, there are some unknowns and some potentials. So for example, when we look at the number of individuals that may take a leave and the cost associated with that, hiring substitutes, we don't necessarily know next year how many individuals are actually going to take that leave. So we have to go based on past trends and use estimates. But I can go over the ones that we definitively know. The cost of living adjustments, we did, the teachers most thankfully and graciously took a 0% cost of living increase for the majority of those on the salary scale. Just 2 steps on the salary scale, step 14 and step 20, because they actually do not move a step, were given a 1% cost of living adjustment, but all other members received a 0% cost of living adjustment. There was still some movement on the steps, and so when you see, the back of slide or 2 about the cost drivers having to pay for step increases, so there was an increase in salary between the steps. However, typically what happens is, if you're familiar, you not only move a step, but you also get a cost of living increase. Thankfully, our teachers union agreed for the year not to take any cost of living increase. And so that saved us a significant amount of money, so thank you to them. We obviously have some cost of living adjustments that we had to make to stipends in the back of the contract that hadn't been changed in years, at least I think 15 to 20, and that would be the coaching stipends, extracurricular stipends, some of our department head stipends, and the such. So that was a little over $6,000. There was an incentive in the contract that was agreed upon for a sick leave retirement. And again, when we look at estimating the number of employees that may take advantage of that, we had to estimate based on how many people typically retire in a given year. So we looked at what that potentially may cost. That was about $83,000. Now there was a deadline for them to notify the district. Ms. Healy and I sat down Friday afternoon. We have to kind of regroup because the deadline was over the weekend, so we haven't had a chance to reconnect to see if any last minute ones came in. But that number, as of Friday afternoon, was closer to $50,000. So already we have a $33,000 savings there that we can apply to teaching positions. parental leave, again, where does this cost come from? This is, providing the additional cost of substitute teachers. Teachers are obviously entitled to leave of absences now. However, if a teacher was to extend a leave for whatever reason, if it's a maternity leave or it could be other leaves related, a lot of times those leaves, when they get extended, are unpaid, and so therefore we're saving the cost of the teacher salary. Obviously, we're able to hire a substitute teacher, but the cost of the sub is really negated because of the savings from the teacher. The new parental leave that was agreed upon, as you know, as you approve this, does allow the teacher or staff member to use their own time, and so there won't be necessarily that cost savings if those leaves are extended, because they will still be being paid. Those won't be unpaid leaves now, so we won't necessarily have the savings for the substitutes. So again, we have to go based on how many potential leaves, and we look at historical data to see how many typical leaves happen each year, and that's what that 91,000 is based upon. That number could actually be higher, that number could be less, but when we look at kind of trends the last few years, that's what we base that upon. And then the early retirement incentive, as you know, there's already an early retirement incentive built into the contract, but there was some language changes for next year that changed the age restrictions and who could actually qualify for that. So again, we look at who may be eligible for that for next year. That cost is $625,000. Again, an estimate, but we have to make sure that we account for that money. Now, the deadline to notify the district of that is not until the end of the school year. We feel as though we have a pretty decent handle on who may be taking advantage of that, but we really won't 100% sure know until the end of the year. But right now, we're looking at not that number. We're cautiously optimistic. Then when we looked at Friday, again, if they notified us that they were going to take advantage of the sick leave retirement incentive, some also notified us that they were taking advantage of the early retirement incentive. So we have a sense right now that we're just around $300,000. So again, there could be another savings there, and that maybe we over budgeted. We'll know that in a couple weeks. Hopefully we did, but if we found ourselves under budgeting, we certainly be in a different situation. And then obviously other collective bargaining provisions, meaning that we are still in negotiations with that third union, as I mentioned. So right now we're $1 million plus that we need to make up for, and obviously we've started to go through that exercise, and I've shared this with some of you already. So when we look at positions that we, through that first 3.4 that we had potentially not filled, we had some elementary positions that we were hoping to fill. We've now left those unfilled. And again, this exercise is on paper, because as we start to have funds available, we know these may not necessarily be our reality. We had 3 middle school leave of absences that we are leaving unfilled that we had planned to go ahead and fill. We've had 3 additional reductions at the middle school, which resulted in 4 non-renewal letters. So as I've shared with the committee, we did issue non-renewal letters. Unfortunately, it's never a great exercise to have to go through and be in that position. Unfortunately, I didn't do it a number of times throughout my career, so I certainly understand the angst and heartache it causes. However, we have to make sure that we are covered, and that we have taken the proactive steps to make up this deficit, instead of kind of waiting to see what happens and then find ourselves really in a situation where it's now maybe too late to lay individuals off or non-renew individuals, and find ourselves in a true budget deficit. So we had 2 additional high school positions unfilled. We had the opportunity for a couple members not to come back next year, so there's another savings after that first round. But we did also have to reduce 2 additional positions in the high school, and that resulted in 6 non-renewal letters. When we look at how do those letters get generated, we obviously look at areas that we can reduce. We then look at hire date and certification. So for example, Ms. Hart and I both teach math at the high school level. We have the same certification, hired on the same date. If it's my position, my particular position that may be eliminated, we are both getting letters, non-renewal letters, because again, we're both hired on the same date, we both have the same certification. And so that's basically a domino effect. So does it mean that, all 6 of those positions may not come back? No, but again, we had to take that initial step of non-renewing all 6, and then once funding becomes available, we'll be able to rehire some of those individuals. And then as I've talked about all along, we have had to reduce administrative staff as well, so there was already reductions in administration, and this was one additional. So you can see the savings that I've identified is higher than the potential deficit. I just want to remind everybody that we are responsible for contributing to unemployment. So when we actually start talking about leaving positions unfilled and non-renewing individuals, we really do have to, unfortunately, non-renew additional staff to cover the cost of unemployment. But again, that number will go down as hopefully we're able to bring some of these individuals back if numbers allow. This just gives you an overview of what the impact right now, again, on paper. So this is the first domino. This doesn't take into account central office sitting down with the principals and say, okay, this class size here, this particular grade might be lower. Can we move a teacher from that grade level? Same thing in the middle school, same thing at the high school. Do you hold multiple certifications where maybe I can move you from, the ELA department to the social studies department, or you might have a math science certification, so I might have to take you from the math department and put you in the science department. So that hasn't happened yet because we're waiting to see exactly who we can bring back and rehire. But this gives you an overview of the impact thus far. Obviously, when we look at teaching and learning, our classroom positions right now, we have 16 unfilled or eliminated positions. Again, either unfilled because of retirements, leaves, or we've actually had to reduce those positions. We did have a reduction in the secretarial union. We had 2.5 in the custodial body as well. We were in the process of reducing the proctor positions by 4, and then as I shared with you, we've eliminated 3 administrative positions between central office and building-based. This just gives you an overview again. This is what it would look like right now before we actually make any type of movements. But these are the positions. The positions in red signify that there's been a reduction from previous years. So for example, if you look at first grade Bridgewater, last year we had 10, same thing in second grade, we had 10. So I highlighted that to show that it's a reduction from the year prior. You can see the reductions on the Rainham side as well. Actually, we had 7 last year in first grade. We have 2 retirees, so not filling those positions, we're only leaving 5. But you can see what the impact of that would be. We're looking at class size in first grade right now at 30, 32. Is that reasonable? Is that feasible? I think that's worst case. That's if we have no other option and no other funding sources, then that's what we have to do. But as money funds become available, or we have a better sense of who's taking advantage of these incentives, we'll actually be able to then say, okay, we are going to fill the key positions, the priority positions, and work our way down that list. So again, this is just what it would be on paper, not necessarily what the reality would be. And I hope to have additional information for you on the 12th, be able to give you an update then as well, and hopefully we don't have to give you an update in July because this has all been settled, but certainly might not be able to give you a full update just because some of those due dates aren't until after school gets out. But as I shared during budget sub, the teaching and learning department in special education has been working with the business office to try to identify other potential funding sources that we can bring a position or 2 positions back. How can we fund them creatively with some of our grants? Obviously, ESSER 3 is expiring at the end of September. We have our title grants, so Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. If there's money left over this year, how can we carry that over into next year and maybe use some of those funding sources to actually fill some of these teaching positions? Or can we use, say, for example, ESSER 3 that expires in September, so we can't necessarily hire a teacher next year using that, but is there some purchasing that we could do or something that we could charge to it from next year's budget that now frees up money in that budget for us to be able to bring back one of these teaching positions? Obviously, we've been working closely with our union leadership around this. We were really trying to keep them informed every step of the way, just so that they are aware, because this is impacting their members, so not just our PREA partners, but our ASPE partners as well. And then obviously, this is where my responsibility is to those positions that we can bring back, it's gonna have the greatest impact on the students, while maintaining efficient operations. I am hesitant about some of the positions that we have not filled or plan to eliminate, the negative impact that may have on operations. For example, reducing a position in the business office. We start talking about payroll and other business functions. We're going to be having a different conversation if my staff doesn't get paid because we had a reduction in the payroll office. But that's something right now that I have to weigh. That's something that I prioritize. That right now it may be more important to have a person in the classroom versus in the business office. I know special education as well as taking a hit secretarial-wise in their department. Also have great, big concerns about that as well. But when I look at where we can put our priorities, it really has to be, and I actually think, let's steal your line, Mr. Fitzgibbons, I think you said we have to put our dollars closest to those that are being impacted, and that's our students, or something along those lines. You usually have some wise words to say that I try to replicate when I can. But certainly, when we look at, other positions, we will start to bring back. You will see, and I've shared this in Budget Sub, you're going to start to see postings for anticipated positions because we know there are certain positions that we have to fill. So for example, we do have some retirees or leave of absences in the special education department. We are filling those. They provide a key service to our students. You're going to, you actually have already seen an anticipated opening for 2 ESL teachers. Obviously, I've shared with you our English language learner numbers have grown quite significantly over the school year. Even before our new friends joined us, those numbers were growing. And so, again, looking ahead to next year. So even though we aren't necessarily posting for these positions that I just reviewed, there are other postings that you'll see. And then you'll also see these positions as we know funding has become available, such as like those title grant positions that I mentioned. We might be able to start posting for, those first grade positions or second grade positions or those positions as such. But I will continue to keep you updated. Again, the information in this presentation is not new. You've seen most of it, but obviously I'll just give a recap.
Questions for the superintendent on this side? Ms. Mango.
When's the ideal time to post for new positions?
Honestly, if things were great, we'd probably do it back in March and April once we know. It's never really too early to start posting. So I think we're probably a little late, but we don't want to be posting for empty positions that we know we're not going to fill. Because there are strong candidates out there that we get in and then we can't deliver on that. So we know we also have a group of individuals that we have non-renewed that if we can, we're hopeful they're still available and that we can hire them back. That is our first priority when possible. But I think other districts are in the same situation, so we're again cautiously optimistic that there'll be a strong pool out there, even for a link to the.
Anything else? This side? No. This side?
No, I just want to, when we think about bringing back, if we can bring back anybody, I would suggest first grade because those numbers are staggering. To have a classroom size of 30 and 32. Those are your foundation levels. It's not good.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, sorry.
Can I ask one question? For any of the staff that we gave layoff, that we gave notices to, if they meet any of the qualifications for the positions that we are hiring, will they be recalled or asked to come for those positions? Again, I don't know if they meet like special ed or whatever.
Certainly, they'd be certainly open to and encouraged to apply for those positions, absolutely, if they had that certification.
Anything else? Either way? No. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Powers, for the update. Moving on to superintendent's evaluation.
Transition over here.
And this is your presentation of the evidence of meeting your goals this year, just so we level set the public and the school committee.
Yes.
I'd prefer to keep the questions at a high level when we do this, because obviously each member is going to have to make their own determination based on the goals that are written. and the evidence you provide, and we're certainly welcome to delve in deeply if we need to. And then, the other thing I will just make sure everyone knows, Mr. Loesch, you're welcome to do a superintendent evaluation, should you choose, but we will be asking Mr. Nolan as well if he'd like to do an evaluation, because he was here for most of the year. So, with that said, I'll turn it over back to you.
Thank you. Yes, I did want to provide you an opportunity to review my evidence in anticipation of you completing my superintendent's evaluation. I just wanted to kind of, again, provide some context and background information. The educator evaluation framework or system that currently all of our educators, not just superintendents, but our administrators, our teaching staff, undergoes really a 5-step evaluation cycle. And it starts with the self-assessment. The self-assessment is really the first part of this. It's usually done, again, depending on your position, late summer, early fall, where you're reviewing your evaluation from the prior year, you're reviewing data that you have at your fingertips, and you're kind of just self-assessing your performance in the past against the rubrics and standards that have been set for you. From that self-assessment, you're then asked to develop goals and create goals for the year. So again, that usually typically happens depending on your position, summer, fall, and then those goals are actually implemented throughout the school year. And then there's a mid-year or mid-cycle, what we refer to as the formative assessment or evaluation. And that, again, depending on your position, happens usually, if you recall, I presented after the budget was presented, so in February, I think, for myself. For our teaching staff, it's typically sooner. And then at the end of the cycle is a summative evaluation. So that's the point we're at now. So I'm presenting you evidence towards my summative evaluation as I am on a 1-year evaluation cycle currently. What I am, what you should be measuring me against is the standards of effective administrative leadership. And the first one is being instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, professional culture. So those are the 4 main areas of the educator evaluation for superintendents. From there, those are the standards. There are indicators underneath, and I'll show you an example. So those standards and indicators are put together into what they refer to as a rubric. And so you have access to that through your documentation, and obviously these are all public documents that the state publishes as well. What that really looks like is this. This is an example of what the rubric actually looks like. So this would just be a snippet from Standard 1, Instructional Leadership. So it gives you a kind of a definition what instructional leadership for superintendents would look like, and then it actually gives you indicators underneath. So the first one is curriculum, and then they actually give you the 4 ratings. So you actually rate the individual as unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. Proficient is actually the goal, not just the superintendents, but in the state educator evaluation system, that is what everyone should be striving to do. Obviously, exemplary is certainly above and beyond and considered a model. Needs improvement, you certainly have pieces of what you're trying to do or pieces of that element in your practice. And then unsatisfactory, obviously, you wouldn't necessarily see any evidence of that. So this is what the rubric looks like, and obviously what you would be doing is then giving an overall rating. You don't necessarily evaluate each indicator on the superintendent's rubric. You actually, when you look at the rubric, you'll see it's quite lengthy. Really what you're evaluating me on is when I identify goals, I also identify indicators that align, and so you would be issuing the rating on my progress towards those goals, as well as using that evidence to then go ahead and rate me on those indicators that I've correlated with. This next slide, I really just kind of went over exactly what the ratings are. You can see I put proficient in bold, as you'll see that all throughout the educator evaluation system. So the end of the cycle, summative evaluation, it does assess the progress towards goals. You do use the ratings, did not meet, some progress, significant progress, met or exceeded. Superintendents are asked to create a professional practice goal, a student learning goal, and a district improvement goal. And then you're also assessing me or rating me on the performance on the standards that I just went over. And those are unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, exemplary. And again, they're the standards: instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. This is, again, just a snippet of what the evaluation system looks like. This is kind of the cover page. So you can see, there's 3 goals listed: professional practice, student learning goal, district improvement. This is where you would rate that did not meet, some progress, significant progress, met and exceeded. And then also you're assessing my performance on the standards. So instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. And you would either rate me in those standards as unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. So that's just an example of what that looks like. I did want to just share with you again, you have access to this. You've had access to these all year, but especially for Mr. Loesch being new, just to kind of go over my goals. As you know, the school committee approved my goals going into this school year, and also approved the benchmarks and evidence that I would be supplying here this evening towards that. So these are already been pre-established. But my first goal, my professional practice goal, participate with you.
Mr. Powers, if
Yes.
I can just interrupt for a second.
Yeah, of course.
I don't mean to. But you worked with the long-range planning committee over last summer and into the fall to agree on these goals and what the evidence was, and then we as a full school committee voted on the report from the long-range planning committee to say, you know, this is what we came up with, and we're recommending it. This is now what we're evaluating you on. And I'd just like to remind all of my fellow school committee members, we do have a training on superintendent evaluation coming up on Wednesday, which will probably be very helpful in, you know, reinforcing a lot of this. So thank you.
Yes, no problem. Participate in the new superintendent's induction program, which I've shared with you. You've had a chance to meet my new superintendent's coach, Ms. Bella Wong. So again, how does that align to our student success plan? What DESE indicators on the educator evaluation rubric does it align to? I've actually called those out down the bottom just so you could have the definition there, so you didn't have to necessarily go back and refer to the rubric, but you certainly can. So these would be 2 of the indicators that you want to take a closer look at, because I supplied evidence. They align to my goals, and so therefore they would be the indicators that you would be rating me on. Obviously, key actions you're familiar with. And then the evidence. Just to point out, because there were some updates to this, I had talked about one piece of evidence being a transition plan and findings. I actually changed that at the recommendation of my new superintendent's program. They actually require that we do what they refer to as an entry plan and report of findings. So somewhat of a different title, but I have updated that and provided that for you there. So you'll actually see the entry plan and then the report of findings from my entry plan going back to last year. As I've shared with you, the new superintendent's program, just being in the situation that I was in last year, serving as acting interim and going through the development of the student success plan, actually basically put me a year ahead of all my new superintendent colleagues. That is really the end result of what they're trying to do through this new superintendent program, is to have new superintendents create a strategic plan for the district. So, again, I find myself a little bit ahead of the rest. But I've included the agendas for you. If you click on those links, it'll bring you to the folder, all the agendas and participation materials, so you can see the outline of what we've covered throughout the year. As I shared with you when I presented my evidence in the middle of the year, there really weren't, this was anticipated of, because not knowing what the program is going to entail. There was an anticipation of having to complete assignments, but we were never actually assigned an assignment to complete. It was all really group discussion, presentations, so there wasn't anything tangible for me to actually produce other than the entry plan. So that would really be the one assignment. I also included the calendar of meetings, not just for this past year, but I believe in that link you'll see the meeting dates for next year as well. And again, I'm happy to read through all this, but I know just the essence of time, you have access to all of this. The second goal is a student learning goal. Oversee the expansion of iReady to the high school, where we would target the 9th grade students who didn't necessarily score as high as they should have in the 8th grade. Again, it's tied to the student success plan. It's tied to the DESE indicator of curriculum, which I called out for you down the bottom. You can see the key actions that we took and the corresponding evidence. I would just say this is actually interesting. Anytime you expand a program, it really provides you the opportunity to assess how successful it was. And although I would say this, had showed great progress and probably met the goal. I don't know if this is necessarily a program we would continue. We didn't find it to necessarily be overly beneficial to our ninth graders. I think what we found is that some of the ninth graders that we identified may have probably rushed through the test in 8th grade, because when they took it again, when they found out they had to take it again, a lot of them tested out. As the year went on, we did see the usage drop. We also ran into some scheduling issues as well. And so when we really look at, was this program appropriate and beneficial to our high school students, I think the data probably points to the fact that it wasn't. But we wouldn't have known it unless we went through it. But you can see there through the links, you'll see some information there. You'll see that, again, usage and individual personalized instruction went down as the year went on. But we've already started taking steps to look at, all right, if we're not going to do iReady next year, what else can we do? So the math department at the high school is looking at iExcel, which is actually a high school program. You got to remember, iReady is K through 8, so we're trying to fit a middle school 8th grade program into high school. We just didn't, after the end of the pilot, it didn't really seem as though it worked. So iExcel would replace math. Read 180 we have available, something we've already been using in the district. And in speaking with our special educators up at the high school, that seems to be more appropriate, a more appropriate intervention for our students versus Read 180. And then obviously I just want to point out, I hoped, but given the timing of the year, those benchmarks are administered at the end of the year. So you're going to see on some pieces of evidence here, I did put an asterisk underneath the chart. It just says that given the timing of this presentation, there wasn't necessarily data available because they haven't finished the administration of the third benchmark in order for me to present you my evidence to that. And you'll see that in a couple of other places going forward. Again, these pieces of evidence were established and developed last summer, so in anticipation of what may come. The district improvement goal, I think we made tremendous strides here. Obviously, we wanted to collaborate with district and school administrators to ensure our district and school priorities are aligned with the student success plan and that progress towards the alignment is monitored. One of the things I think you've seen them, obviously we had all the principals present their school improvement plans. When you look at our school improvement plan, it is so aligned, so tightly to our student success plan. It mirrors that, not just in format, but also in the actions and the initiatives that have been identified by the schools. So I'm really proud of the effort that the principals have undertaken, that we as a district have undertaken to make sure both of those documents are aligned and, again, moving us forward in the right direction. Again, aligned to the student success plan, DESE indicator evaluation. I call that out for you down the bottom. You can see the key actions and then obviously the benchmark and evidence. Again, because of the part of the cycle that we're in, the educator plans and analysis of formative and summative evaluations is just not available. That would be something until we actually have to submit that data to DESE in the summer. So obviously that would be after the fact. But you have links to the school improvement plans. You've seen those. Again, the schedule and overview of the superintendent site visits, which correlates to the key actions, and then the superintendent's roundtables, meeting agendas, and minutes. Again, correlating to the key actions. And then, yes. The last district improvement goal, I'll work with the Director of Business Services and collaborate with the district leadership and the leadership of each building in towns to develop a sound fiscal budget. I think you obviously heard from the auditor this evening the sound fiscal practices that we do have in place here. And obviously I know she made a point to point out Ms. Babalo's willingness to work with the auditors and some of the things that she's already put proactively in place. It was really nice to hear that your work is validated, so congratulations. But again, the alignment to the student success plan, the DESE indicators, the key actions that were identified and established last summer, and then obviously the benchmarks and evidence. What I did note there in using the two asterisks was that the line item budget, it's not available because the format that you're used to, say, in iVision's that budget sub received tonight, that rollover process hasn't happened. So we have it in Excel, but we don't necessarily have it in the nice format that you are accustomed to. That will be coming this summer in different divisions. I also did include the staff budget meeting schedule that we held. As you know, this was something that we decided to do after the fact, so this was not originally part of the benchmarks and evidence. We did hold budget meetings at each of our schools to speak with staff and go over the budget challenges that we're faced with and answer any questions. And then obviously, I also included the community outreach regarding the FY25 budget. That was not something that was originally part of the evidence and benchmark, but I thought it was important to include as well. And that basically concludes my presentation. Evidence, you have all the links. I certainly didn't want to spend all the time it would take to click the links and show you everything that's in there. This one is just, the slide just has the corresponding documents that were referenced. So again, DESI guidance to evaluating superintendents, DESI summary evaluation form, the superintendent rubric, our student success plan, and then my report, entry plan report findings.
Were there any high-level questions for the superintendent about his report out? Obviously, we all have access to the detailed evidence that we have in our links, and I don't want to go into those point by point at this time. You're certainly welcome to do it in your evaluation, and it will all be considered when it's done. But high-level questions, all right? Well, thank you, Mr. Powers, and I'll just say, I was thinking of being really ambitious and asking you guys to get it all done by Wednesday so I could get the evaluation out by next Wednesday. I don't think we can do that. So,
Meeting is Wednesday.
no, by this Wednesday.
No, but we have a meeting, a training.
Yes, no, I was joking about that. Ms. Conrad, I've read that, yes. So what we're gonna do is, we'll have our training on Wednesday. We'll take this back, write our own evaluations per the forms we get, and then we'll have a meeting. We're gonna need a budget meeting, clean up anyway in July. We'll schedule, I believe it's the 24th, did I hear that correctly?
July 24th.
July 24th to hear the review for the superintendent and from the committee, and we'll put it all together.
We are gonna need a budget meeting in July, so we will need to have the July meeting. Is that where you're going?
No, I was just saying, I thought our evaluations were due to DESI by July 1st. It's my
I'd have to double
understanding.
check with,
My understanding is the superintendent evaluation is due to
Okay.
DESI by July 1st.
Oh, and we may need a third meeting in June. Who
Well,
knows?
Our meeting is when, the
Well,
June 12th. June 12th, Wednesday.
could people be able to turn around to you by Monday? Or Sunday night?
The weekend.
It's due to DESI,
But-
and it's my understanding,
Yeah.
we need to turn it into DESI by July 1st.
Instead of-
I would prefer to work on this now and not have another meeting, fourth meeting, or a third meeting in June, because we all are really busy towards the end of June. I would prefer to be able to turn this back around to you by Sunday night.
Do we know if that's a recommendation or a requirement?
It's a requirement from that they are supposed to be in by July 1st.
all right, we'll get that done.
Get them to you, basically.
Yeah, but just make sure you take into account all the information we get on Wednesday.
Right. Right.
I don't know how much editing I'll be able to do over that time, but I'll do what I can.
Right. I mean, I think just for people to remember, and you'll hear on Wednesday at the training, is when you look at these, there's lots of indicators, and there's always been some confusion. All we need to fill out is the indicators that were agreed to in long-range planning with Mr.
Right.
Powers, so,
And I thought his report was very specific too, of exactly what
Yes.
we're evaluating on, to make it easy and true.
it's very clear what you presented here to be able to follow.
Yeah. All right, well,
I mean,
That's
I
what-
think that's a tight timeline, but I think I would prefer that too, because that
that's
way
what
we
we'll
stay
do then.
on track.
We'll make it work. We'll make it work. Thank you for keeping us legal, Ms. Conrad.
I don't think many of us are not available towards the end of June.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll make it work. All right, thank you, Mr. Powers.
that concludes my presentation this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on, Mrs. King, Budget Subcommittee Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a little bit out of date, so a few things I will give updates. We did meet on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 for a budget sub. And then we did just meet right before this meeting, so I don't have technically a report on that yet. I'll report out on the June 12th meeting from that.
We met on May 14th as a budget subcommittee at 5:30 in the superintendent's conference room. In attendance were Mr. Fitzgibbons, Mrs. Martelli, Superintendent Powers, our reporting secretary, Mrs. McDougal, and myself. We received a fiscal year 2024 budget update from Ms. Babalola via Mr. Powers. She could not attend that meeting, but she provided an update to him, which he gave at that time. Mr. Powers gave an update on the fiscal current year budget and any line items that we continue to watch throughout the end of the school year, throughout the end of the year, which have been items that we've indicated every budget sub-meeting. Utilities such as heat and electric that we are watching, transportation, the substitute lines, as well as out-of-district tuition. So those are all lines that we watch through the budget until the end of the year, which closes June 30th. And Ms. Babalola will give us a final report on that, of where we are, clean up everything, and we'll do our final transfers at that time. Mr. Fitzgibbons also questions how we would end this fiscal year with our E&D, which we do not know technically until the end of the year, but Ms. Babalola is confident that we should definitely have the $2 million that we budgeted for next fiscal year to offset next year's budget. Mr. Powers stated at that time that we would have more information on encumbrance releases in the next few months, and the transfers will be voted on. So we did discuss at this meeting we had right before this current meeting. We need to do those transfers at the July 24th meeting. So once June 30th closes the books, we will have all the final transfers and all the final numbers at the July meeting to go over and how this budget looks, closing that out. Fiscal year 2025 budget update. Mr. Powers went in depth during his report on that. At our budget sub-meeting, he did give us an update on the status and current shortfalls and how he was trying to close that gap, especially since we had ratified the ESPN teacher contracts, and like he stated, we're in the current negotiating with the clerical secretary contract right now. So we did have the June 1st deadline for early retirement, so we kind of have an idea on if that's going to be a cost savings to us. And June 17th, we have the sick leave buyback was June 1st, and then early retirements will be June 17th. So once both of those dates have passed, we can see if those are going to be a cost savings to us, depending how many teachers or just staffing is going to use both of those items. And like I said, he gave a detailed report on where we stand right now. So we'll have final numbers after those two are passed. Excuse me. So for July meeting, we should have a detailed where everything came through. Facilities update. Mr. Powers gave an update to the track and tennis court project. As an update, further update from today's, this project is nearly complete. The track project is complete as of right now. They're just doing some landscaping type work, but the track itself is complete. The tennis court, they have been waiting until this week where the temperature was right overnight for that to cure. So the tennis is not totally done, but should be done within the next week to 2 weeks. And then they just have some site work such as grass, landscaping, etc. So the track team has been, since they made nationals, they have been practicing on it. The coach has a key, so they've been able to practice on the track. But we're not gonna, it's not totally done. We're still finishing drainage remediation and the landscaping, so that will be open for school use and public use probably in the fall. But he has been allowing the track to use it so they can practice for their national. Further facility update, BMS and Williams window shade projects are out to bid. I did not get an update on that. Is that still out to bid, or where is that?
Yes, they're both up to bid. They've actually been awarded, I believe, Mr. Yes. The shades, they've been awarded, correct?
All the bids have been received, and I'm going over them by tomorrow.
Okay, so I'll have an update on the next June meeting, July meeting. RMS gym floor project bid. so we did have a further update on this as well. At the main subcommittee meeting, this bid came in higher than anticipated. We had originally budgeted $120,000 with an insurance claim and only counting on the $50,000 deductible. The bid came in at $247,000. Mr. Kilgore did go back to the insurance company and worked with them to get further reimbursement on that. And we received an update today that they did approve that. So it is still only the deductible we will be responsible for, so that cost will be covered by a supplemental check from the insurance company as well. So that should start the day after school ends and be finished by this summer for school opening in September. So Mr. Powers did have to leave that meeting early to go to the National Honor Society ceremony. The other item that we did discuss was the fee schedule. So if you may recall, the budget subcommittee had reviewed the fee schedule for the 24-25 school year. We had already previously reviewed and addressed the base fees on that schedule, but we had not determined any fee changes to the middle and high school fees previously. So at that main subcommittee meeting, we did review the middle and high school fees, which had not been reviewed or adjusted in many years, actually. As you can know, which was attached in the drive, after discussion, the high school fees were raised from $100 per school year to $125. That parking fee had been the same for decades. The majority of the fees were raised by a 10%. Color guard and marching band, this was raised to $200 based on the recommendation of their advisor for fees that he would need throughout their schedule. We also aligned the pricing of the middle school and high school sports fees to $360 per student with a family cap of $700 at each site. I know this was something we had previously discussed, how would that work, because previously at the middle school level it was a certain fee per sport per student, so we did want to have a cap. However, the cap could not be a family across the district because those fees support that school for coaching and busing, etc. So that's why we did with that wording of $360 per student with family cap of $720 at each site. Lastly, we addressed the sports or fun fees, which was recommended by that advisor to raise the price to $10 per week. Further, the only other thing that we reviewed but declined to change the pricing was the alternative high school and summer school. Alternative high school, we determined that those students, we did not want to add to those fees since they are seeking out to try and get their GED, and we did not want to add to those fees at this time. Summer school, we had increased that price last year, so we did not increase that price. So based upon that, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the revised Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District fee schedule for the fiscal year 24-25.
Motion made by Ms. King. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Martelli. Discussion, Ms. King? Ms. Martelli, any other discussion? Ms. Mainville?
So I understand that these fees haven't been raised in a while, and I was wondering if there are any specific reasons why they need to go up, besides that being the reason. Example, did we find that equipment has increased by 10%, or I'm just looking for a correlation between the increases and actual costs?
I can defer to
Can I try?
Mr. Powers.
Can I try first, and
Yeah,
then
go ahead.
we'll defer to Mr. Powers
Yeah.
if needed? Yeah, I think it really is just general inflation, you know, that we haven't seen, you know, for example, with the bus fees for athletic teams, and with the increase in coaches' stipends, as we just heard about in the budget presentation, etc., that there are in fact cost drivers that weren't around 10 years ago when these were last set. So, you know, we're trying to be respectful of obviously people's money and whatnot. that's really the overall, I mean, you know, I just think about going out to get a pound of hamburger these days, and, you know, it's a little bit more than 10% in the last 10 years, so.
So do we have a sense of how much, how this will impact the budget and how much money we can expect over the next year or two based on these increases in the enrollment?
I don't know if we've done that yet, Ms. Bevelola. No. Yeah, we could probably give a swag on it, but whatever the revenue is, I just bump it by 10%, call it even, whatever we see today for that kind of fee revenue and whatever's in the budget, we could probably bump it by 10%, call it even. Although there are some takebacks, for example, middle school sports weren't capped before per family, so that might be a savings to the middle school parents and so on. So, but I think 10% would be a fair number to guess going up for the fees.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the clubs and fees, the advisors have, those fees have increased now, especially busing has been a huge increase with transportation charges. The middle school and high school wasn't necessarily to increase that fee, as Mr. Fitzgibbon said, but that's more kind of aligning what we're doing there because we do have the middle school sports, but we're trying to align it. The high school had a cap, and we did not have that at the middle school level. And as a middle school parent, I know that's come up over and over again. Why are we having a cap at one school and not at another level? So some of it was increasing and trying to make sure we're not making money, which we do want to make money, but we're also being mindful of keeping up with the fees, but also aligning across the district what we're doing at the different schools.
Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. Anything else? No? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Oh, Ms. Mainville is opposed, so it's 7-1. Thank you. Thank you for speaking up. I gotta hear it.
Further, the budget subcommittee approved the minutes of April 8th, 2024 at that meeting. Under other, we did have the Bridgewater Town Council approved our school district budget at their meeting of May 7th, 2024. Mr. Fitzgibbons, Mrs. Bevelola, and myself were in attendance at that meeting. Rainham approved our budget at their town meeting on May 20th, 2024. Mr. Powers, Mr. Fitzgibbons, Mrs. Davenport, and Mrs. Conrad Labarento were in attendance at that meeting as well. As I stated, we did have our budget subcommittee meeting right before this meeting at 5:30, and I'll report out on that at our June 12th meeting. We further discussed at the meeting right before this, we do have some treasurer reports that we do need to take a vote on at the June 12th meeting, so those will be brought forward at that time with Ms. Robichaud. And then July 24th, we will also have to have final transfers and end of year votes from Ms. Bevelola at that time. So more to come on that. And that concludes my budget subcommittee report.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. Healy, personnel report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Powers. I am doing my report from March 26, 2024 through May 20th, 2024. So just to go down the list, top here, I have 5 new hires through this time frame, 9 retirements, either retirement notice, 5 people leave resignations. We have 1 rehire, 1 termination, and Mr. Powers reported on Mr. Powers, Jeff Powers. So that was 1 as well. That's all.
Okay, questions for Ms. Healy? No? Oh, Ms. Mainville, yes. I should just ask you right away. That would be, you know.
So I was, in preparation for this meeting, I looked at reports from the previous month, and I noticed that the ESPs and the proctors are the ones that tend to be, the attrition is there. I was wondering if you've seen any other trends, or when looking at those 2 positions and doing the exit interviews, are you getting any feedback as to why, or
And I'd like to emphasize that, Mr. Powers, because, you know, we as a school committee really did a good job, I think, in trying to help out the ESPs with the contract we just negotiated with the BREA Unit B. And, you know, got them to looks like closer to living wage. I don't know if they exactly agree, but we have a year to talk about it, I guess. But I think that's very important too. It's just, you know, what can I do versus what am I doing versus the money I'm making. You know, it's very important to a lot of people, especially trying to make ends meet these days. Anything else, Mrs. Smith?
No.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was wondering if we have used any of that, diversity teacher grant of $14,000. Have we been able to utilize those funds?
Yes, so we have utilized some of the funds. Ms. Barry, the assistant superintendent, has been working with me and the team on any of our initiatives. So some of the ones that I have known, I've put in requests for are our job fairs at Stonehill, Bridgewater, and the one in Boston at the Merck. We have other expenses that go into that as well.
Remember, we ran our staff health and wellness fair in January, so some of those expenses we were able to charge towards that.
Any further? Okay. Anything else from other committee members? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Yoy. And we'll have the annual health report from Ms. Brennan.
Good evening, Chairman Fitzgibbon, school committee members, Superintendent Powers, Assistant Superintendent Barry, Mr. Pickle, Ms. Gavalola, Mr. Schatz. Thank you all for your time. So hopefully you've received the annual health report. The challenge being this year in particular is the increase in acuity we're seeing across the board. I feel like sometimes I single-handedly break the bank. I don't know what to tell you. The support sometimes required by the increased acuity kind of overflows into, unfortunately, Ms. Hart, your support services. Children you would never have imagined out in the community, let alone attending public school, are here. And they're here to stay. Medical technology and, science has given them the ability to thrive out in the community and participate in schools at a rate we've not seen before. And it will continue. My supplies are expensive, I know that. It just continues. The AED batteries, 11 of our 23 time out this October. We need 11 batteries. And we're seeing the need for beds, electric beds that go up and down so that we can change and perform activities of daily living on students, wheelchair-bound students. One of the single biggest challenges is George Mitchell. The acuity at that school is not to be underestimated. 7 wheelchairs, oxygen, trays. Yeah. The rest of the report, we're a grant-enhanced district, so we are compliant with our state mandated screenings. Vision, audiological, postural, BMI. In addition to that, again, state mandated ESPER, but health department recommended mental health risk assessment. And we find it worthy. We had 39 crisis emergency calls this year alone. Health appraisals was a little bit of a challenge. We strive, one of our performance measures for GPA just to make sure there's a connection for all students with a healthcare provider. We were certainly challenged by that with resettlement students this year. Minute Health was really good to us. We have had moderate success with, the immunizations and physicals. Immunization compliance overall, we're at 96.8%. said for it. We had 4 EpiPens this year, as opposed to our 8 last year. So perhaps it was effective. Again, a learning curve. Removing food from venues is not an easy thing to do. Our community collaboration continues. The Conant Center is really good to us. They give us our CPR training, kind of work with the preschool teachers at a kind of a reasonable rate, etc. We work with Bridgewater State University, particularly Dr. Christopher Frazier. He's on the Health Advisory Committee. We help him with his suicide walk. We have a little team, the Rays of Hope. Massasoit Community College, it's been well over 25 years where we mentored student nurses. Bridging Lives High Point, we have our substance use prevention collaborative. And we already mentioned the Health Advisory Council. We're in our 5th year of the Comprehensive School Health Grant with the Department of Public Health. It's actually 5th year of the second 10-year, so 10 years previous, and we're in another 10-year cycle currently. Bridgewater is committed to health services. Every office has at least 1 RN. We maintain a staffing ratio of at least 1 to 500. Again, some schools the ratio can be met, and yet the acuity is challenging. That's what I have. With any questions?
On the left is Ms. Conrad Gilbert.
I would just like to comment and give kudos to the nurses and to the support staff. When you look at these numbers and what's happening in our schools, exactly as you said, and across the United States, there's increased acuity with kids. And to keep them in the community in our schools goes to the work, speaks to the work that you all are doing every day to keep them in our schools. And I just would like to highlight, because of course I'm going to go here, is the signs of suicides numbers. I mean, it's really just, of our 8th and 10th graders, 20% of our kids screen medium to high risk of suicide. It is alarming, it is concerning, and again, great kudos to the nursing and our social work staff and our guidance counselors for keeping these kids in school, but it's concerning. And one other question I have, actually, along those, I know we're using Care Solace. Has that made an impact at all? And like, what is like Care Solace really doing for us?
So overall, in southeastern Massachusetts, we're seeing a diminished access to healthcare overall.
Yes.
We've got hospitals filing for bankruptcy in our immediate area that won't take our kids. We just defer the ambulances. We had a direct transport the other day to Boston. That's impactful. Ties up the ambulance. Calling on the heels of that ambulance, it's always unnerving to hear, well, we don't have one. It was like, so we have a good working relationship with Rainham, West Bridgewater, et cetera. So we got assistance, immediately got a second ambulance, same timeframe. Our mental health, they've always been very dignified, equally prioritized manner, come when we call. Again, we try not to abuse it. We use crisis when we can use crisis. And CCPC has opened a new crisis center in Brockton, which has been impactful. It's been assistive. So, yeah.
Is Care Solace helping families?
So just to give you a quick update, I actually got the monthly email from Care Solace today.
Can we say what Care Solace is?
So Care Solace is an online referral program. So they connect families with counseling. They try to say that they'll do it within 24 to 48 hours, where I think if you've ever tried to experience that locally, it's 3-4 months versus you're actually connected with anybody. So this is just from July to June. They refer to it as inbound interaction, so us reaching out or a parent reaching out, because it won't always be us initiating that contact. We may provide the contact information with Care Solace. 2,147 interactions from the district connection, district to Care Solace. Communication saved, so they're again trying to eliminate you having to get a referral and then call this person to get another. So they are saying that they've communications saved. They've eliminated 13,000 communication opportunities. We've had 44 is more handoffs, so again, staff initiating, we're gonna turn this over 182 more handoffs. We then have had referred individuals that have declined services, so again, 38. Total appointments into care is at 97 appointments made. And then there's also an opportunity to reach out to Care Solace anonymously, just to kind of call and inquire. That's been 102 contacts made anonymously. Again, I think it speaks to, members being in crisis and not really sure what to do or able to actually go through this. So
And I believe a lot of the principals send it out in their weekly updates, because I remember seeing it just in the last couple of weeks,
Yes.
whether it was you, Mr. Powers, or the principal, but I can't remember exactly what I saw, but letting parents know.
And a lot of our counseling staff, nursing staff, they
They
actually
have it
bed
on
the
the
link right at the
signature
signature line to it.
Again, they provide that important bridge services in an area that's notorious for somewhat of a black hole of care. It's important to find these providers, and we've seen a real decline in availability, so they're kind of picking up some of the slack.
Ms. Martelli, Mr. DeMarino, anything? All right, anything from anyone? Also, okay, great, thank you so much. Oh, you do have a question, oh.
I'm so sorry. So I saw that the hearing test showed that everyone who took the test failed the test. I wanted to know if it was an equipment issue
no.
or it was an inaccurate
It's an
report.
inaccurate report.
Okay.
I apologize.
No
Yeah.
worries.
I'll get it fixed for you.
Although if you ever dealt with my children at a certain age, you'd think they were deaf. Exactly.
And I also wanted to know, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Powers, does the student success plan consider the results that are coming up in the screening, and do we kind of compare from one year to the next? When I read the screenings and the kind of things that came up, the social emotional piece of our success plan came, so I was wondering if this is referenced.
Absolutely, so those are areas that we reevaluate every year, certainly through the budgetary process, because a lot of what maybe Ms. Granite or Ms. Hart needs through student supports are additional resources and personnel. So Ms. Granite would bring this information to say, this is really valuable, like another nurse. Ms. Hart would advocate for additional counseling staff and years that they get to support that. So obviously that being part of our student success plan, this information, the information that Ms. Granite has that she shared with tonight is all part of it.
And so do we expect, based on like increasing staff or any kind of budgetary intervention, what are we expecting to see next year based on those interventions?
Well,
How do we look forward to see success?
Well, I think when we look at such the data that she shared, a decrease in some of these at-risk behaviors or at-risk reporting, same thing we use our Care Solace. Some of these interventions, unfortunately, Ms. Granite has talked about with the acuity. We've had significant students move into the district that we can't anticipate. And so sometimes it's hard to actually know plan for this, but when we have that data, we certainly can. I think, we, as a district, as a school committee, supported this over the years since I've been here. I think when I first started, we maybe had, with the exception of some of our special education programming, maybe 3 school adjustment counselors across the district. We now have 1 in every single school. Some schools have multiple. So it really speaks to the commitment of not just, the school employees, but the committee, the community, and the commitment to that. So it's definitely something that's been on everyone's radar. This data, you can't hide from it. It's right there. And so we know we have to react and make certain that that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Ms.
I
Gay.
know too that we've seen this, I know Mrs. Brennan comes every year and gives us the results. I know a lot of it times you'll change programming based on it, like the Bridging Lives, for instance, I know you've moved that grade down to a
Yes.
5th grade program. So it does, they do look at that and say, you know what, we're having high risk at this level, we're gonna move it down and try and get those 5th graders before they become high risk.
So it's really helpful background.
That Bridging Lives is a great opportunity for students here at the high school to be able to really make an impact on the younger students in the district.
One of the programs Ms. King is referring to is been now in 5th grade. At
thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Mrs. Grannon, appreciate that. No unfinished business, we'll wait for Ms. Martelli to step away here for a second. Moving on to new business, approval of payroll warrants dated April 4, April 18, May 2, and May 16 of 2024. Is there a motion to approve? Made by Mr. King, seconded by Mr. Damarino. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Ms. Martelli, you wanted to come back. Approval of preschool, elementary, middle, and high school handbooks. They should have been in your package. I mean, I understood it was just kind of cleanups.
Mrs. Barry has just some
Yeah,
information, if there's any questions.
Yeah, if there's anything urgent. Is there anything we should have been focusing on, Mrs. Barry?
Well, I mean, you have the changes in your packet.
Right.
And I was just gonna review with you kind of the rationale behind it, but I know that is something that you do have.
Yeah,
Happy to do it?
go ahead.
Okay, see how fast I can get it done. Okay. Like I said, I'm here to review the proposed revisions in the handbooks. You actually have the handbooks and the revisions have been highlighted within them, so you have the additional context within each change. Outside of what I share, we're gonna be making changes to formatting, adding dates, et cetera, and we usually do that over the summer. We always start with the youngest student and move to the oldest. I think what I'll do is I'll do the high school. We'll start with the oldest first, and the high school actually has the most changes anyway. First revision at the high school allows us to tighten up the language regarding student absences, specifically who can verify absences and what is considered an excused absence. So just making sure that language is clear for students and their families. The next revision is related to truancy and skipping classes, moving away from suspension and relying instead solely on Saturday detention or its equivalent to address these issues when they occur. You're gonna see that we're saying Saturday detention or its equivalent kind of throughout, and we'll be making changes to that. One of the main reasons for that is because not all kids can stay on a Saturday because of work, family, and sports obligations, so we needed a little room with that. We're gonna be changing that somewhat. Next up is dismissals, removing the language regarding demerits for 4 dismissals. It's not current practice, we're taking that out. After dismissal or leaving early, there's arriving late, so the next change is student tardiness. We're proposing, we're taking out the language about demerits, and once again, looking for multiple tardies to be addressed instead with Saturday detention or its equivalent. Again, there's that language. Saturday detentions are generally difficult, as I said, due to student schedules. The next change is fairly straightforward. We're taking out summer math and reading requirements as there are no longer requirements. We've also added language to tighten up the sports registration process at the high school. And while on sports, we added some language regarding the sort of behaviors that will not be tolerated in the locker room. So we don't really need to get into that, but we did have some clarity of language in there. We're also proposing the removal of demerits in the handbook, as the practice really is no longer in effect, so you'll see that throughout the handbook of the school. In addition to that, we're changing the language regarding cell phones in class at the high school. We're no longer requiring backpack storage or a wall holder, but just that they're out of sight during classes. That's another change that we made. We're taking the language out about student IDs on display at high school. And lastly, we're taking out language around substance abuse, specifically alcohol. We're taking out the language requiring a rehabilitative program when infractions arise. We most certainly encourage this step, but we cannot mandate it, so that's the change in that language. Moving on to the middle school handbooks.
Ms. Barry, can
Yes.
we just stop and
Yes, of
just
course.
ask if there's any questions on the high school
Absolutely.
handbooks first, and then I'll take a
Sure.
motion to approve that, then we'll move to the middle school.
High school level.
Et cetera. High school. Anything? Questions? No? Okay, is there a motion to approve the high school handbook as presented? Made by Mrs. Conrad LaBranca, second by Ms. Mango? Oh, Ms. Kane, okay. I couldn't hear. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to middle school.
Okay. In the middle school handbook, we're revising the language regarding student promotion for a few reasons. The first is that non-promotion in the middle school is most certainly not a routine practice. And secondly, we do not require summer school attendance at this level. The way the language was formally written, it made it seem like that was routine and that we had summer school as a consequence to that. It's just not something that we do routinely anymore. That's the only change at the middle school level outside of formatting changes and date changes.
Questions on the middle school? Changes? No. Is there a motion to approve? Made by Mr. Demerara, second by Ms. Martelli. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, yes.
Elementary is an easy one. We don't have any content changes this year, just some changes to formatting.
Is there a motion to approve? Yeah.
I don't have to vote on that? It's just formatting, I don't think you have to make
Okay.
conference.
If nobody's worried about it, I won't be worried about it.
You worried about it?
Hey, you know, I'm a belt and suspender type of guy, usually.
Yeah, I mean, it's no harm, no foul
Okay.
to accept it.
Yeah,
I saw Judy's face was like.
We'll take a motion to accept.
I'll move to accept the.
Made by Ms. Martelli, second by Mrs. King. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
The preschool handbook was one that we actually focused on quite a bit this year, so we have some changes to talk about there. We added explanations to the role of the health service office and our behavioral interventions for pre-K families to better understand these services. Because this is really the entry point to school, it was important for families to really understand how those services are utilized in the district. The handbook previously had the names of all the teachers within the program, and we took those out. That's not something that we have in any of the other handbooks. So we don't have specific names of teachers connected to programs moving into 24-25. We also took out several links to community resources and programs that had no affiliation with the school district, with the feeling that they don't necessarily belong in a handbook. It could be something that we would just distribute separately, if at all. We added an explanation to our program delivery format. This is a change that we made for the current school year, where we're a 2-day, 3-day, and a 5-day format. We just felt that it was important for families to understand why we had that format change. So we added language to explain that our new, why we had that change, and that basically making that change and holding true to 2, 3, or 5 days allowed us to have optimal learning experiences for students and better planning for teachers. We have a new standards-based report card in pre-K, so we just added language to explain that. We also added language to clarify how families and caregivers could become involved with their child's first school experience, and related to that, how the school manages visitors with schools, so that they understood that if they do become involved, here's the process for visiting the school. We added language to explain tardiness and early dismissals procedures at the Mitchell. Again, because this is the first introduction to school, we wanted to make sure that families knew how that was addressed. Lastly, we will be making tuition changes in the handbook based on some of the voting that had occurred tonight in the fee schedule. And the last, and by far the best addition to the handbook, if you turn to the last page, we have original artwork by our very own pre-K alum, Matthew Wilson. So that was a nice addition to the pre-K handbook.
Good. Questions, issues with the pre-K handbook? No one to the left? To the right? None. I'll take a motion to approve. By Mrs. King. Second by Mr. Demarino. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Berry. Other business that may probably come before the school committee after the agenda is posted? I know of none. Does the superintendent? Okay, moving forward. We will open again public comment for a period of 12 minutes per school committee policy. And I know everybody in this room and nobody is from the public right now. So we're just going to close the public comment. If anyone rushes in, we'll reopen it for you, don't worry. Announcements. If any school committee members have anything they want on the next agenda, please email it to myself and Mr. McDougall and we will try to get it on the agenda. Our next school committee meeting is going to be on Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, in the lecture hall of the BR Regional High School. We will have the superintendent's evaluation that night, so everybody at home should tune in and watch. Any other announcements from the rest of the committee on anything going on? Seeing none. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? By Mr. Demarino, second by Mr. King. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We're adjourned at